Good morning. Glad to have a few minutes together. What a great day we had yesterday in church. And I just want to say what a great God we serve. Why don't we be in the book of Numbers today if you want to find that. And of course, Numbers is the book telling a lot of things, but especially about the wandering in the wilderness. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Before we do that, the month of May we're calling it Recruitment Month. Our goal is to recruit people. You know the sign, the Marines are looking for a few good men, and Uncle Sam wants you. I don't know who it is now. I think probably Uncle Sam is outlawed because it's a gender prejudice that it's Uncle Sam, not Aunt Mary or something. But anyway, we'll try to not be political today. But our goal, we just want to this month talk about serving God, just serving God. Last night at church, I talked about this, just the importance of serving God. What can I do for God? Just what can I do? And again, we're all different. One of our good men, just great guy. Love him, and he has worked here in our church. We met him in retirement years, and he helped in the buildings, and he just helped with mechanical work and building work, and what a blessing. And now he's in a convalescent home struggling. And I hope we'll get him back to church soon. But now he can't do now what he used to do. But what can he do? And what can he do with his time, his talents, his treasures? That's what we need to think through. Time, talent, treasure. We all have those. And it might be our talents get limited when our body gives way or whatever. We still got our time, and we still got our treasure. And our time, what can we do with our time? We can phone people. We can write notes. One of the most significant things that was ever done in our church was one of our ladies she just wanted a job. She and I were talking, and because of some things at home, she wasn't able to get out much. And we decided, why don't you follow the obituaries and follow the local obituaries and see if you can find out, you go online or whatever, so you can find out where people live, get an address, and it may not always be right, but when you can, write a letter. And the letter was, we heard about your loss, and we want you to know that the folks here at Faith Baptist Church care, and we're praying for you. And I said, sign it, your name, courtesy committee chairman. And you are the whole courtesy committee. You're the chairman, you're the secretary, treasurer, worker, the janitor of everything. But anyway, but that gave her a job, and she did it from home. And then she'd take the address and she'd get it to me, and I or someone else at a soul winning meeting, would give those addresses out. And small town, not a lot of obituaries, not a lot of people dying, and you can't always find an address. One of those addresses happened to be Audrey Tyler. Audrey Tyler just lost her husband, and they'd retired out here in Lake Elsinore. And so I sent one of our men and his teenage boy over to visit this Audrey Tyler. Long story short, she got saved. She meets Ray Fossey at a parking lot outside a store. Ran into him literally with her grocery cart, and gets talking to him, brings him to church. After a few weeks, I get to lead him to Christ. And they get married, and for the rest of their lives, they invested in serving God. That one for many years, they purchased every bus we had. He said, "Your buses are junk. You care if I replace them?" I said, "I'd be happy." And one by one, he'd get a new bus, and we'd get rid of the oldest and worst. Then he'd get another bus and get rid of the oldest. Pretty soon, all the buses we had were Fossey's fleet, we called them. That all started with a lady at home who we designed this program of this courtesy committee, just sharing in the bereavement, the broken moments of life. And so you may not be physically able or whatever, but just to say, I want to serve God. Now, I pulled these out of my pocket because they're sticking out of my pocket. When you take pictures like this, you're not supposed to be whatever. Probably not supposed to have your sleeves rolled up. But any case, I passed tracts out yesterday. I had stacks of them in the back of the auditorium. When you come to church, pick up some tracts. If you're from another church, get some gospel tracts, pass them out during the week. From Sunday to Wednesday, pass out some tracts. Wednesday to Sunday, pass out some more. For one, many people through the years have been saved by reading a gospel tract. But then on the back of the tract tells about the church, whatever church you've got in your tract, and gives people the opportunity to know where to go to church. I'll tell you another thing that happens. When you pass out a tract, you're telling the world Jesus matters. He's not an unknown entity. You see, the advertising world makes it seem like everybody's doing this. And the crowd that doesn't know their gender, they're pushing and pushing, so it makes it seem like everybody. Well, everybody's not that way. And the vast majority of our country are common sense thinking, logical, decent people, and they know what a home is, and they know whether they're male or female, but it's all advertising. Well, this world will get you so muzzled that you won't talk about God, and you won't talk about church, you won't talk about Jesus. Pretty soon, the world gets thinking no one thinks about it. Well, every time you pass out a tract, you're telling the world, hey, there's still people who love Jesus. And if people keep getting tracts and tracts and tracts, it's like an invitation to a new restaurant. You keep hearing that restaurant talk about over and over and over. People think, well, maybe we ought to go there. And so pass out gospel tract. That's a simple thing. If you go to a store, you can pass out a tract. You could put tracts in the neighbor's windshield wiper on their car, in their front door. You could go door to door like most of us do every week. We're out knocking on doors and witnessing to people. Look, just find a way, make a decision. I'm not going to go through a day without at least giving somebody the gospel, whatever it might be. But just talking about serving God, and this month we're looking for people to have jobs. Now, a job could be coming down to your church and washing the windows, mowing the lawn, pulling weeds, washing the bus windows, washing the whole bus, and whatever it might be. But it's something that we can do. What can we do to serve the Lord? Work in the church nursery, sing in a choir. I'll tell you, you can just sing out in church will be a help. Showing up and singing out, because and I don't mean to be critical, but I can look around the crowd while we're singing, and there'll be people all over the crowd, not just tight-lipped like they're mute. And I think you're an advertisement to everybody around you that the hymns don't matter. And that's a pitiful thing to be advertising. And I'll just tell you, it is a blight on the church. When people will sit, and I'm not talking about a new person who doesn't know a hymn and can't find verse 1 in the chorus and verse 2. I'm talking about people who've been in church for years. And you might say, well, now you got a sore throat, fine. But we're not, you know what I'm talking about. There are people who just sit and they don't care. This Bible talks about the value of singing, how important singing is. And I'll tell you, we need to decide that our life belongs to Jesus Christ, and we need to do something for him. So anyway, book of Numbers, get my glasses here. Numbers chapter 14. I want to take a moment today and talk about some of the troubles that we face in life. And a lot of the troubles we face in life, God never intended us to face them. Now understand, there may be a car accident, a sickness, a death of a loved one, a military takeover of our country, whatever it might be. And that God has a plan, that God's working around us. But by the way, this national mess we're in, if we had kept our churches right, and if we had kept Jesus first and not let the public schools rob our kids of God and the Bible and prayer, we wouldn't have the mess we got in Washington, D.C. And that's really what we're looking at here. Because we make decisions, now that we're in a different situation, and now we're facing temptations God never meant for us to face. Now, I'm not saying God forsakes us. I'm just saying we shouldn't have been there. And so look at Numbers chapter 14, or I'll read it for you. It says, and they said one to another, let us make a captain and let us return to Egypt. Now, they said, let's return to Egypt. Why? Because they'd sent the 12 spies in, and they spent 40 days wandering the land, saw the walled cities, saw the giants, saw the fruit, the agricultural blessings, and they came back and said, oh man, it's awesome, but I'll tell you, we can't do it. We can't face these giants. There's no way. Oh, they were sobbing, and they decided to trust what they saw and what they felt instead of the word of God, and they should have gone right into the land of Canaan. That's what Joshua and Caleb said. Joshua and Caleb said, let's just go do what God said to do. They're bread for us. We'll eat them up. And the people said no, and they said, let's go back. Now, from this moment on, all these troubles are troubles they should not have faced. Had they gone on in faith, they wouldn't have faced these troubles. So if you go over to chapter 14, down at verse 43, in the process, well, down at verse 31, Moses says, your little ones, which you said should be a prey, them will I bring in, and they shall know the land which you have despised. When they didn't go into the land, God said, you despise this gift I'm giving you? I'll give it to your children. And so he sent them back in the wilderness, said, all of you over 20 years old, you're all going to die. The kids are going to inherit the land. Now the people got thinking, oh, we messed up. We better not. So we better go into the land. And so they're going to go into the land. And God says, don't go in the land. Moses said, don't go in the land. God's not with you. And they said, no, we're going to go do what God told us to do. No, God told you to do it before. Now God says, go into the wilderness. You're going to die. Well, we don't want to die. We're going to go into the land. And as a product, there were thousands saved. 1443, let me get down to the verse here. And the Amalekites and the Canaanites stood before you. You shall fall by the sword, because you are turned away from the Lord. Therefore the Lord will not be with you. But they presumed to go up to the hilltop. Nevertheless, the ark of the covenant of the Lord and Moses departed not of the camp. And the Amalekites came down, and the Canaanites which dwelt in the hill, and smote them, and discomfited them even to Hormah. Now that defeat should never have happened. But when we don't obey and do what God asks us to do, we end up with people we shouldn't be around. We end up in places we should not be. The simple thing, we ought to be in church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Well, we missed church, now we're over here. Now, whatever goes on over there, that we're out of the will of God. It was not God's plan for us to be there. And now, whatever we get into, it's not God's fault. We chose that. You go down to chapter 16, Korah. Korah was the rebel. And Korah and Dathan and Abiram and some of the noblemen, 250 princes of the assembly in verse 2. These guys decided, Moses, you're not the only one. You're not the only one God talks to. We're all the whole people of Israel. We're all holy. They've not been very holy. Just chapter 12 and 14, they were pretty unholy, and God killed a bunch of them. And so, but there's a battle now. Korah and Dathan and Abiram and those guys were wrong. The earth opened up, swallowed them. They went straight into hell. Thousands, 14,700 people died. But you know what? It was not they should not have been there. They should have been in Canaan, taking city after city. But because they didn't do what they were told to do, now they're in a place they should not be. Now they're facing temptations they should not have faced. And obedience is so incredibly, incredibly important. Look over to chapter 16 and down at verse 49. Now they that died in the plague were 14,700 besides them that died about the matter of Korah. You go over to chapter 20 and along the way here. Now again, they should have been in Canaan, conquering city after city, but they're not. They're out in the wilderness. And Miriam, Moses' sister, dies. So Aaron and Miriam and Moses, the first two were born, Miriam and Aaron, and then Moses the baby. And so Miriam was his sister, and they had a problem with him at one point earlier on. But now Miriam dies. Well, I had to bother Moses, and so he had a tender spot in his heart and grieving. And well, we need to be careful when we're grieving, because we'll say things and we'll act ways that we should not act, and how quick we are to say and do foolish things. And I'm that way, and I'm sure you're that way. You think, man, I shouldn't have said it that tone or that harsh or that whatever. But we get caught off guard, and we get pushed at that moment of our weakness. I hope you understand we're all weak. I hope you don't get critical of people who say and get involved in a situation that's maybe not as good as it should have been. And you're not there. You've never been there. At this very situation, the devil knows to catch you, and now you're harsh, and you say some things, maybe ugly words or whatever. And you think, I shouldn't have said it that way. Well, the devil's after us, and we're flesh. So anyway, Miriam dies. Moses is grieving, and there's no water. And the people come griping and complaining at Moses. And in verse 2, there was no water for the congregation. They gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And the people chode with Moses and spake, saying, would God we had died when our brethren died. And boy, they're griping. Now, they shouldn't have been without water. They should have been in the land of Canaan. But because they didn't obey, now they're without water. Now they're in the wilderness. And now they're griping at Moses. And God says to Moses, all right, speak to the rock. and water will flow and take care of the people's needs. Well, Moses is emotional from losing his sister. It's been a long battle in the wilderness, and the people are pushing him, and he gets angry. And now Moses was the meekest man that ever lived, according to God. And Moses gets mad, and he strikes the rock twice. Must I bring water out of this rock? Bang, bang, and the water flows out. People get they walk away. They didn't think about that they'd provoke their leader to his own destruction. And God said, you're not going to the land of Canaan. That rock was a type of Christ. And the first time he was hit, the rock was smitten. That pictured Calvary. But after that, you just talk to Jesus, and he's your friend. You get to Calvary, and after that, it's just you and him. He doesn't need to be re-crucified. And to us, it seems a small thing, but it's a big thing to God. And God says, you broke the type, you messed it up, you're not going to see the land of Canaan. And Moses later on begs God and says, don't you think maybe I could? And God says, don't talk about it again. I don't want to hear about it. It's done. People mourned for 30 days after Moses died. So what? Moses didn't go to the promised land. It was their fault. They provoked him. Yes, he should have been self-disciplined or whatever. But I'll tell you what, people can provoke one another. And we have to be very careful. I need to be very careful not to provoke my wife. She's flesh, and she could say things or do things she would not normally do. And she could provoke me to behavior that is not what I would normally do. We could provoke our children us, our boss, our co-workers, pastor, church members. Oh, how careful we need to be with our words and how we ought to pray. God, help us to say the right thing in the right way. And may we not be a stumbling block to the brethren. But Moses loses the promised land. And I'll go over to chapter 21. I'll show you another one. In chapter 21, King Herod, the Canaanite, heard that Israel had come by, and he came and took some of them prisoner. And he started a war with them. They should not have been there. They shouldn't have had to face him. They should have been in Canaan. Down at verse 6. Verse 5. And the people spake against Moses, against God, and against Moses. Wherefore have you brought us up here to die? And so God in verse 6 sends fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and the people died. And that shouldn't have happened. And they should have been in the promised land. And then chapter 22, Balak, an enemy king, sees the power of this group of people, and he's fearful, and so he hires Balaam, a false prophet, to curse them. And that shouldn't have, none of that should have happened. And how careful we need to be. How careful we need to be where we allow our children to go. And where we go, where we don't go when it's the right thing. How careful we need to be on the right track. Now, the story goes on. You can read through Numbers. All the burdens, all the difficulties. Now, God was with them, and God gave them victory, and they got through it. They got the 40 years in the wilderness. They came around to the east side of the Jordan River, conquered Jericho, got the land of Canaan today, 2,000 years after Christ's birth. 1,500 years earlier, when this was all taking place, the life of Moses, 3,500 years ago, God still loves Israel. Israel still is people, but there's been a lot of hurt. Should not have happened. The Holocaust should not have happened. Why? Israel didn't accept the Messiah, and they rejected the Bible, and they rejected the prophets. And so many difficulties come, and God's still God, and God is holy, and sometimes we don't catch the fear of God. But, years ago, there was a guy who went to jail. He'd grown up in our church, and he was a good guy. But he moved out of the area. Hadn't seen him for years, but I got a call from him, and he'd got into some trouble and spent a little time in jail. And I'm going to say a year or two, I don't know for sure. But he called me. He said, "Preacher, my wife's got this job, and it was not a good job. It was an inappropriate situation she found herself in. But she's trying to make enough money to care for her and her kids while the husband's in jail. And he said, she can't work here. I can't have my wife doing this," and going back and forth. And I agreed with him. But you know what? Had he been the husband and father he should have been, had he not been in jail, she wouldn't have been in that temptation. And I'm not justifying her behavior. I'm just saying, had he been where he should have been, she would not have been where she was, and the whole situation would have been avoided. I think of a guy who got saved in jail. And thank the Lord, he got saved in jail. But all the hurt he faced and the mess, it all started. He was with the wrong people. He was out late at night, and he didn't do anything wrong. But the guys that he was with did something wrong. And all that came up was the three of them were together, and this wrong was done, and they robbed a store or whatever. And he ended up in prison for a while. And then through prison, he got saved. Thank God for it. But you know what? That all happened because he was with the wrong people at the wrong time in the wrong place. And because he made these decisions wrong, these wrongs happened. I'm thinking of a guy I know, maybe, just, I mean, incredibly successful man. His career was just flourishing and eating up every minute of his time. And he was busy being a success, a big success. And while he's being a big success, his wife had several little children, and she got to be friendly with somebody she should not have been friendly with. And inappropriate relationship took place. And he calls me up, telling me the situation. And thank God they got it all right. And the marriage was spared. And everybody's grown and married now. Kids are grown and married. And the husband and wife has remained very successful. But it was touch and go for a while. It was very, very scary. It all happened. And now the husband didn't do anything wrong in the sense of sinful, but he was working so many hours that he put his wife in a position of loneliness, and she had some needs, and she married him, not his career. She married him, not his paycheck and his bank account, and she was lonely. And no, I'm not justifying what she did. I'm just saying that had he been the husband he should have been, there's a good chance she'd not found herself pressured and tempted like she was. And thank God. And they were saved before all this happened. They were saved, God walked through it, and then they made it. But again, how careful we need to be, just to do the little things right. I think we need to be careful where we send our children. Prayerfully go into each day. You that have children, and ask God, please help me see. Somebody says, hey, can your child come over here to our home, or we're going to go on this activity? Ask God, seek God's wisdom, because if it's the wrong place and the wrong people, the wrong things are likely to go on. Or if it's missing something, yes, they could do that. There's nothing wrong with what they're doing, but they're missing what they should be doing. And if they miss what they should be doing, then whatever they are doing is not right. Not that it's sinful. It's just if it's not what they're supposed to be doing, then it is wrong. And we need to be so careful. And I remember when I was in Chicago on the bus route, little guy, it was rough in Chicago then as well as it is now. And I don't know rough or worse or better, but our area, North Chicago, we had a little guy that rode one of the buses, and I'm going to say 9, 10 years old, something like that. And he got shot, and I think it was an accidental shooting, and he died. But it happened on Sunday. Had he been on the bus on Sunday, he wouldn't have been there, and that wouldn't have happened. And it's not the end of the world to miss a Sunday at church, but I'll tell you what, we need to be very careful about staying in the right place and doing the right thing, because we just don't know what's going to happen. And you read through the book of Numbers, you'll see, man, there's a lot of hurt, and it could have been avoided had they just done the right thing and gone into the land of Canaan. Had David gone off to battle like he should have, it says at the time when kings go forth to war, David's up on his roof. He sees Bathsheba. Didn't need to happen. Had he been where he should have been, in story after story is that way. Now, as the people of God, let's be careful. Let's do our best. And the good thing is, when we stumble, God's there to pick us up and drag us through it. We might be muddy and bloody on the other end, but he'll get us through, because he's not going to forsake us. And thank God for a Savior that'll carry us through the dark nights. But let's be careful. Let's be careful to do a good job. Do our best to be where we ought to be, doing what we ought to be doing, the little things right. Have a great day. Pray for our week, that God bless and make it a great week. Lots to do. Mother's Day this next weekend. Pray that many people would come to church and some folks would be saved. And again, thank you for being such a blessing.